Before dawn broke over the stone roofs of the town, they dragged him into the marketplace in chains. Iron rings cut into his wrists as merchants shuttered their stalls and priests turned their faces away. To the crowd, he was nothing more than another condemned body, thin, bruised, expendable. Yet as the cold rang of the bell echoed across the square, a rumor moved faster than fear. The man kneeling in the mud did not scream like a common thief. He stood with the stillness of someone who had been taught never to beg, and beneath the filth on his skin there were marks, subtle, deliberate, signs of a lineage most people believed had vanished generations ago. No one asked his name. Names were dangerous in times like these, but those who watched closely sensed something deeply wrong. His posture was too disciplined. His eyes held neither panic nor defiance, only a restrained calculation, as if he understood the rules of power better than those who chained him. The magistrate announced his punishment with bored precision, unaware, or pretending to be unaware, that this public humiliation might unravel a truth capable of destabilizing the realm itself. By nightfall, the square would be empty. By then, it might already be too late to stop what this moment had set in motion. If you're drawn to hidden histories, buried truths, and stories where power and bloodlines collide in devastating ways, subscribe to the channel now. These are the stories history tried to forget, but couldn't bury forever. The town of Falkenheim had learned to survive by obedience. Its stone walls were old, its people older in spirit, bent by decades of famine, taxes, and shifting loyalties between lords who rarely set foot there. On the morning the chained man was displayed, the marketplace filled not with outrage, but with quiet calculation. People watched because watching was safer than speaking. He was identified publicly as Matthias, a name common enough to invite no questions. The magistrate read the charges from a parchment already creased by repetition: vagrancy, forged papers, insolence toward an officer of the count, crimes that rarely earned chains, unless the accused had no protector. The punishment, too, was deliberately vague: detention until further inquiry. In Falkenheim, that could mean days or disappearance. Up close, the damage on Matthias's body told a different story than the charges. The bruises were patterned, not wild. Someone had beaten him with training and restraint, striking where bones would not break, where scars could be hidden under clothing. His hands, despite the grime, bore faint calluses, of a kind seen not in laborers, but in men trained to ride and fence. One old cooper noticed it and quickly looked away. Observation could be dangerous. Matthias had arrived in Falkenheim 3 nights earlier, alone. On a borrowed horse, he returned before dawn. He took lodging at a widow's house near the river, paid in clean silver, and spoke little. What drew attention was not what he said, but what he asked. He wanted records, old ones, parish births, tax rolls from before the plague years. He asked about a family name no one had spoken aloud since the last rebellion failed. By morning, soldiers were at the widow's door. The count of the region, Eberhard von Rottweil, was not present in Falkenheim that day, but his shadow was. Eberhard ruled carefully, rewarding loyalty and erasing threats with equal patience. He had survived 3 emperors and 2 civil wars, not by force, but by memory. He never forgot a bloodline. When his steward sent word of a stranger asking about the Aurelian line, a disgraced noble house, stripped of lands decades earlier. Eberhard did not dismiss it as coincidence. The Aurelians had been powerful once, not kings, but kingmakers. Their estates bordered 3 trade routes. Their sons were raised in courts. Their daughters married into houses that mattered. And when they fell completely. Officially, the line ended with a public execution 27 years ago. The last male heir was said to have died screaming in chains. Matthias did not scream. As the hours passed, townspeople brought bread and water to the square under the pretense of commerce. A priest paused longer than necessary, murmuring a prayer that was less blessing than examination. He noticed the scar on Matthias's shoulder, thin, pale, the kind left by a ceremonial blade, not a tavern knife. The priest swallowed hard. He had seen that mark once before, years ago, on a boy baptized under armed guard and recorded under a false name. By midday, word had reached the castle. Eberhard ordered Matthias brought to the holding chamber beneath the granary, a place without windows, designed for forgetting. The chains were tightened as he was led away, but Matthias walked without resistance. Inside, away from the eyes of the town, the magistrate allowed himself a rare display of curiosity. "Who are you really?" he asked, not unkindly. Matthias did not answer. He only looked at the man with something close to pity. That silence disturbed the magistrate more than any lie could have. He left the chamber shaken, instructing the guards to keep the prisoner alive until nightfall. Orders, he said, were coming. In the hours that followed, a messenger arrived from the castle bearing sealed instructions. No execution, no public judgment. Matthias was to be transported quietly after dusk under heavy guard to Eberhard's private estate. No records were to be kept of the transfer, no witnesses. As the sun dipped behind the walls, Matthias was given water and bread. He ate slowly, deliberately. When the guards returned to shackle him for transport, one of them hesitated. He recognized the prisoner, not from Falkenheim, but from a battlefield long ago, when he himself had been a boy soldier, following banners he barely understood. Recognition passed between them in a fraction of a second. That night, as the gates opened and the cart rolled out under cover of darkness, Matthias finally spoke. "Tell your master," he said quietly, "that the blood he tried to erase learned how to survive." The guard said nothing, but his hands trembled, and miles away, in his candlelit chamber, Count Eberhard von Rottweil read the message and realized with a cold certainty that the past he had buried was walking back toward him, very much alive. The estate of Count Eberhard von Rottweil lay beyond the river, guarded not by walls, but by reputation. Its towers were modest, its halls narrow, deliberately so. Eberhard had learned early that excessive grandeur invited scrutiny. Power, he believed, should feel inevitable, not impressive. Matthias arrived before midnight. He was led not to a dungeon, but to a small stone chamber warmed by a single brazier. The chains were removed, replaced by guards at the door. Food was set before him, meat, bread, wine of good quality. It was not kindness, it was assessment. Eberhard wanted to see how a man behaved when treated as an equal before being broken. They did not speak that night. Eberhard watched from behind a wooden screen, noting everything. The way Matthias cleaned his hands before eating. The way he tasted the wine but did not drink deeply. the discipline of someone raised where indulgence was a weakness. It confirmed what Eberhard already feared. At dawn, the Count entered alone. Time had reshaped Eberhard into something sharp and economical. His hair was white, his back straight, his eyes still restless. He studied Matthias without greeting, as one might examine a ledger with an error buried deep inside. "You should be dead," Eberhard said finally. "So I've been told," Matthias replied. There was no anger in his voice. That unsettled Eberhard more than defiance ever could. They spoke carefully at first, circling the truth. Eberhard accused Matthias of impersonation, of trading on myths and forbidden names. Matthias listened patiently, then asked a question that shifted the balance. "Who signed the order to execute Lord Severin Aurelian?" Eberhard's fingers tightened around his cup. The execution had been public, lawful, blessed by imperial decree. But the order, its origin, had never been spoken aloud. "I did," Eberhard said, "to preserve stability." "You signed it," Matthias said, "but you did not write it." Silence stretched between them. Outside, church bells rang for morning prayer. Matthias spoke then of fragments, of being moved between monasteries under false names, of tutors who taught him history but never their own, of a woman who died protecting a sealed document she never opened. He did not claim inheritance. He claimed memory. That was far more dangerous. Eberhard countered with his own truth. He spoke of rebellions financed by the Aurelians, of chaos disguised as reform, of a realm nearly torn apart by ambition cloaked in virtue. He spoke as a man who believed sincerely that cruelty, when measured, could be moral. "You were a child," Eberhard said. "Your bloodline made you a weapon before you could choose otherwise." Matthias met his gaze, "And you made yourself judge." The conversation ended without resolution. Eberhard ordered Matthias confined, not imprisoned, but restricted. He would remain under guard until Eberhard decided whether he was a threat or a tool. What Eberhard did not anticipate was how quickly Matthias would become neither. Servants noticed first. Matthias spoke to them as equals, asked about their families, remembered names. He did not promise change. He listened. In a household built on fear and efficiency, that alone was subversive. Whispers began. Some said he was mad. Others said he was dangerous. A few said he was rightful. Within days, letters arrived at the estate, unsigned, carefully worded. Old allies of the Aurelians, long silent, were stirring. They did not ask for restoration. They asked whether the heir truly lived. Eberhard burned the letters one by one, but the smoke lingered. The greater threat, however, came from within his own blood. His son, Conrad, had returned from the capital shortly before Matthias's arrival. Conrad was everything Eberhard was not: charismatic, impatient, convinced that power should be seized loudly. He saw in Matthias not a danger, but an opportunity. "You're holding a symbol," Conrad argued one night. "Use him, publicly. Let him validate us, then disappear." Eberhard refused. Symbols, he knew, had a way of escaping control. Conrad did not accept refusal easily. That same week, a rider arrived bearing imperial seals. The Emperor's council had heard rumors of an Aurelian survivor, of unrest among minor houses. They demanded clarity. Eberhard was given a choice: present the man or eliminate the uncertainty. Eberhard delayed. Delay had always been his greatest weapon. But Conrad moved faster. On the seventh night, Matthias was woken by the sound of steel and shouting. The guards at his door lay unconscious, or worse. Conrad stood waiting, armor half-fastened, eyes burning with conviction. "You don't belong in chains," Conrad said, "but neither do you belong here." They rode before dawn, not toward safety, but toward the capital. By the time Eberhard discovered the betrayal, the gates were empty, and the road was already swallowing them. For the first time in decades, the Count felt something dangerously close to panic, because if Matthias reached the Emperor alive, the past would no longer be something Eberhard could manage in silence, and if he did not, then the realm would demand to know why. The road to the capital cut through fields stripped bare by winter and villages hardened by suspicion. Matthias rode in silence beside Conrad, hands free, but watched closely. They did not speak of trust. Both men understood this was not an alliance born of loyalty, but of timing. Conrad believed he was controlling the narrative. He imagined presenting Matthias before the Emperor as proof of his own foresight, an act that would elevate him above his father's shadow. What he did not understand was that Matthias had been living inside narratives his entire life, taught to read intentions the way others read scripture. On the third night, they stopped at a fortified abbey loyal to the crown. There, imperial riders were already waiting. The summons had come faster than expected. Matthias was taken alone into a chamber lined with faded tapestries depicting victories long exaggerated. The Emperor did not attend. Instead, 3 counselors questioned him, men trained to dismantle truth through procedure. They asked for documents, witnesses, seals. Matthias offered none. He spoke instead of dates, of forgotten clauses in succession treaties, of marriages annulled under pressure and restored in secret. He recited the private debts of houses that officially claimed neutrality. One counselor turned pale, another smiled thinly. They dismissed him before dawn. Conrad assumed this silence meant failure. He began drafting explanations in his head, ways to shift blame. When the order came, it stunned him. Matthias was to remain under imperial protection. Conrad was not. He was accused, quietly, efficiently, of unauthorized extraction of a state prisoner and manipulation of succession-sensitive information. His armor was confiscated, his escort reassigned. He was sent back to his father under guard, stripped not of title, but of credibility. The punishment was surgical. It left him alive, humiliated, and dangerous to no one but himself. Eberhard received his son days later, broken in spirit, if not in body. He did not ask questions. He already knew the answers. What he did not know, what unsettled him more than all his careful calculations, was that Matthias had not accused him. In the capital, Matthias lived as a guest who could not leave. He was questioned repeatedly, always with courtesy, always without resolution. The Emperor, old and ill, sent no word. Weeks passed. The realm watched, uncertain what to believe. A living heir was a problem. A dead one would have been simpler. Then the letters began. Not calls for rebellion, not demands for restoration. Statements, testimonies, clergy records, private correspondences sealed decades earlier, now unsealed by men who feared history more than power. Matthias had not revealed himself as a claimant. He had revealed the lie that made the current order possible. The Emperor died before any judgment was issued. Succession froze the court. In the confusion, Matthias vanished. Some claimed he fled east. Others said he took vows under another name. Officially, The inquiry concluded without finding sufficient ground to alter the established order. The Aurelians remained extinct. Stability was preserved, but stability is not the same as truth. Eberhard von Rottweil lived long enough to see the consequences ripple outward. Minor houses once loyal to him withdrew support. Clerics spoke more boldly. Tax revolts flared, not in his lands, but in those he depended on. He retained his title. He lost his influence. In his final years, Eberhard requested the old records be brought to him, not to destroy them, to read them. Witnesses said he wept, not for guilt, but for recognition. He had believed himself the author of history. In the end, he realized he had only been its editor. As for Matthias, his name never appeared again in court documents, but across the realm, small changes took root. Laws tightened around arbitrary detention. Lineage records were standardized. Executions required more witnesses, more signatures, more hesitation. No one credited a ghost for these reforms. They simply said the times demanded caution. In Falkenheim, years later, a priest told a boy why chains were once placed in the marketplace. So people would remember who held power, the boy said. The priest shook his head. So people would forget who deserved it. History rarely crowns its rightful heirs. More often, it allows them to pass through quietly, altering the course of things without sitting on thrones or wearing names that make men kneel. Matthias did not reclaim a title. He reclaimed something far more enduring, the ability of truth to unsettle even the strongest hands that try to bury it. The lesson is simple and uncomfortable. Power can erase names, rewrite records, and chain bodies in public squares, but it cannot permanently silence the past. Truth survives not through force, but through patience, memory, and the courage to endure long enough for lies to collapse under their own weight. If you value stories like this, where real history reveals how fragile power truly is, subscribe to the channel. These aren't just tales of the past. They are warnings written in human blood, still relevant today.